Welcome back to Zeritov Sowing the Good Seed. Today, we're going to kind of explore the life of a biblical figure who may not be as familiar to you as some of the big names, but his story really holds a fascinating place in early Christianity.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's St. Matthias, the apostle chosen to replace Judas Iscariot, after his betrayal of Jesus. And it's interesting how Judas's story is so well known, yet the apostle chosen to kind of fill his spot is often overlooked.
Yeah, it's almost like a hidden chapter in the story of the apostles. And what's also really interesting is that there were specific qualifications to even become an apostle, like a divine job application.
That's a great way to put it. Becoming an apostle wasn't just about being a good person or a devout follower. The criteria were really specific and really rooted in the very foundation of the Christian faith.
So let's start there. Why was a replacement even needed? And what were these crucial requirements? What did you have to do to become an apostle?
Well, after Judas's betrayal and his subsequent death, the remaining apostles were kind of faced with this significant void. They were tasked with continuing Jesus' mission and spreading the message of the gospel to the world. But there is more to it than just filling a practical gap. The number 12 itself held this deep symbolic significance.
Right, the 12 apostles representing the 12 tribes of Israel. It's a powerful symbol of unity,
Yeah,
God's covenant with his people.
exactly. Maintaining that number wasn't just about finding someone to take on Judas's tasks. It was about upholding this profound representation of the 12 tribes, ensuring the continuation of that spiritual connection. And so they had this specific criteria that they established.
And those criteria were not easy to meet.
Not at all. The individual had to have been with Jesus from the very beginning of his ministry, all the way from John the Baptist baptizing him through to the ascension. This ensured they had firsthand knowledge of Jesus' teachings, witnessing all the miracles and everything.
That makes sense, but there's one requirement that stands out to me as particularly powerful.
You're talking about being a witness to the resurrection.
Exactly. Imagine the weight of that experience. To have seen Jesus after he had risen from the dead, it must have been just awe-inspiring and life-altering to have experienced that firsthand. And then to stand before your fellow apostles and testify to something so central to the Christian faith, that must have been incredibly profound.
Absolutely. It gives us a glimpse into the gravity of the situation and the importance that they placed on choosing the right person to carry on this vital ministry. But here's where things take a rather unexpected turn. Instead of making a straightforward decision based on those qualifications alone, they turn to this ancient practice to help guide their selection.
You're talking about the casting of lots? It's so interesting, almost unexpected in this context. It feels like something that you'd associate more with the Old Testament that was such a pivotal moment in the early church.
It is a rather striking contrast. They had two candidates, Matthias and another disciple named Joseph Barsabas. Both of them met the criteria. But instead of relying on their own judgment, they sought divine guidance through this practice of casting lots. They essentially left the final decision in God's hands.
And that decision, through that casting of lots, ultimately fell upon Matthias.
It did, and it's this unique method of selection that sets him apart from all the other apostles. It signifies that he wasn't directly chosen by Jesus during his earthly ministry, but rather joined the apostles after Christ's ascension. This earned him a distinct title, Apostle Posthumus.
Apostle Posthumus. The title really makes you think, what does it imply about his role and, his authority within that group? Imagine stepping into this circle of Jesus' closest followers after he was already gone.
It does raise some intriguing questions. Did the other apostles perceive him differently? Because of the way he was chosen, did it impact his authority or the way he approached his ministry? Unfortunately, the scriptures don't give us a lot of details about Matthias' life after his selection. It's almost like he steps into the spotlight for a brief moment, then kind of fades into the background of history.
Which, in a way, makes his story all the more captivating. What happened to Matthias after he became an apostle? Where did he go and what kind of impact did he have?
Well, it's a mystery that's intrigued scholars and believers for centuries. The Bible itself doesn't say too much about Matthias' later life, but there are these different traditions and accounts that try to fill in some of the gaps, and they offer these kind of tantalizing glimpses into his journey.
So let's dive into some of those traditions. Where do these accounts place Matthias? What do they say about the work that he did, after becoming an apostle?
Well, as you might expect, the accounts vary quite a bit. Some suggest that he really focused his ministry in Judea, staying pretty close to the region where Jesus himself had preached. Others suggest that he ventured much further, taking the message of the gospel to more distant lands like Cappadocia. That's in modern-day Turkey.
So he could have been at the very heart of this burgeoning Christian movement, in Judea, or venturing into these new territories, spreading this message to people who had never even heard of Jesus before.
Precisely. And there are even some accounts that link him to more far-flung locations, places like Ethiopia, even Georgia. And these accounts, even with their inconsistencies, they paint this picture of a really dedicated apostle willing to travel to the edges of the known world to share his faith.
It really speaks to the courage and determination of those early Christians. They were facing a world that was hostile to their beliefs, yet they persevered, driven by this conviction that the message of Jesus needed to be heard.
Absolutely. And while we may never know for certain where Matthias's travels took him, the fact that these traditions exist at all speaks to his impact, to the way that his story resonated with those early believers. But there is one aspect of Matthias's story that remains consistent, this thread that kind of connects all of these accounts.
You're talking about his martyrdom. It's a sobering reminder that the early followers of Jesus often faced persecution and often death for their beliefs.
Yes, tragically, like many of the apostles, Matthias did ultimately give his life for his faith. The exact details of his death are a little uncertain, but most accounts agree that he died as a martyr, likely stoned, maybe beheaded, for refusing to renounce his faith.
And some traditions place that martyrdom in Jerusalem, while others point to the Caucasus region, almost like an echo of those stories of his far-reaching missionary journeys.
Exactly. And whether it was in the very city where Jesus was crucified or in some distant land, Matthias's unwavering faith led him to the same fate as his Savior. His willingness to face persecution and death is a testament to how deeply he believed.
It's a powerful reminder that faith isn't just about words or rituals, but about a commitment so deep that someone is willing to sacrifice everything for it.
It is. And while his death is undoubtedly tragic, I think it's crucial to remember that, within the Christian tradition, martyrdom is often seen as a victory, the ultimate expression of faithfulness and sacrifice.
It reframes the narrative. It's not just about the loss of life, but about the triumph of the Spirit, about this unwavering faith in the face of overwhelming adversity.
Indeed. And even though we might not have these perfect historical details about Matthias's missionary work, this willingness to face such persecution speaks volumes about his dedication to spreading the gospel. It underscores that he wasn't just a replacement for Judas, filling a vacancy, but a man of deep conviction and unwavering faith. His story, even with the gaps, offers these valuable lessons for us today, especially for those seeking to understand the true meaning of discipleship.
So let's talk about those lessons. What can we learn from Matthias's life that's relevant to, people of faith today?
Well, one of the most striking things about Matthias is his faithfulness, even before he was chosen as an apostle. Remember, he was already following Jesus, part of that larger group of disciples before the 12 were chosen. He wasn't seeking out a position or any recognition. He was just dedicated to following Jesus and learning from him.
It's a powerful example of what true discipleship is all about. It's not about titles or positions, but about this quiet and unwavering commitment to following Jesus, regardless of the circumstances.
Exactly. And that's a valuable message for us today. It reminds us that our faith shouldn't be something we put on display only in certain settings, but rather it should be a way of life, a commitment that guides our actions and our decisions in every aspect of our lives.
And then there's his willingness to step into this role of apostle under such difficult circumstances. Talk about pressure, right? Replacing a traitor, joining this group that had experienced this profound loss and turmoil. It couldn't have been easy.
Absolutely. It really did require a lot of courage and a deep trust in God's plan. It's a reminder that sometimes we are called to step into challenging situations, to take on roles that we might not feel prepared for. But just like Matthias, we can find strength in our faith and trust that God will kind of equip us for those tasks that lie ahead.
And it's a comfort to know that we don't need to have all the answers or feel perfectly ready to kind of say yes to God's calling. That willingness to step into the unknown and trust in God's guidance is a powerful lesson we can take from Matthias. And of course, we can't overlook the lesson of perseverance, particularly when facing hardship. Matthias faced persecution just like the other apostles, yet he didn't back down from sharing his faith, even when it meant, risking his own life.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that faith isn't always easy, especially in a world that can be hostile to our beliefs. But just like Matthias, we are called to stand firm in our convictions, to keep spreading the message of hope and love, even when it's hard. And I think there's one more aspect of Matthias' story that I find really powerful.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
I think Matthias' story really offers this beautiful example of what we might call divine restoration. His selection as an apostle, coming right after such a devastating betrayal, it shows us that God can take even the darkest situations and transform them into something new and something hopeful.
Yeah, it's like a reminder that no matter what challenges we face, no matter how broken things may seem, God has the power to redeem, to restore. And sometimes Matthias' story shows us that restoration can come in ways that we could never have imagined. But what strikes me most about Matthias is the way his story combines this, faithfulness with a bit of mystery. We know that he dedicated his life to following Jesus, first as a disciple and then as an apostle, yet so much of his life remains, uncertain.
You're right. It's that combination that sparks our curiosity. And it invites us to, delve a little deeper, ponder the possibilities.
And for me, what's most inspiring is his unwavering commitment to his faith, even when facing persecution. It serves as this powerful reminder that, true belief often requires a lot of courage, that willingness to stand firm in our convictions even when it's difficult. It makes you wonder what kind of challenges Matthias would face if he were alive today. How would he navigate this world that, in many ways, is just as complex and challenging as the one he lived in?
It's a really thought-provoking question. It challenges us to consider how we're living out our own faith. In this modern world, that often presents these different obstacles and these distractions.
Right. Are we willing to step outside of our comfort zone?
Yeah.
To speak up for what we believe in, even when it's unpopular or might put us at risk? It's a call to action. It's a reminder that faith isn't passive. It's about actively engaging with the world around us. Sharing the message of hope and love that we've been entrusted with.
Beautifully said. Matthias' story serves as this really powerful reminder that the impact of a life lived for a greater purpose, it can echo through centuries. It can inspire us to embrace our own callings with courage and with this unwavering faith.
Yeah, it's remarkable how his story just continues to kind of resonate, even after all this time. It's really a testament to that enduring power of faith and how one person, even someone who might seem ordinary, can really impact the world.
It really does. It makes you wonder, what would Matthias say to us if he could? What message would he have for us as we try to navigate, all the complexities and challenges of the 21st century?
It's a fascinating thought. If Matthias could, step into our modern world, what do you think would stand out to him the most? How would he encourage us to live out our faith? Especially in a world that's so vastly different from the one he knew.
I imagine he would be struck by just the sheer volume of information, all the distractions that we face every single day. With this constant noise and all these competing voices, it can be so hard to figure out, what's true and what's false. And it's hard to find those moments of quiet, to reflect, to connect with, the divine.
It's true. It's we live in this age of information overload.
Yeah.
And it's overwhelming, even for those of us who, grew up with all this technology at our fingertips. Do you think Matthias would see this as a challenge or as an opportunity?
I think maybe both. It's definitely a challenge to try to hold on to your faith, especially when you're constantly being bombarded with all these messages that challenge or even contradict, your beliefs. But at the same time, it's a huge opportunity. We can engage in meaningful dialogue and share a message of hope and love with more people than ever before.
That's such an insightful perspective. It reminds me of Matthias' willingness to travel to these faraway lands, spreading the gospel to those who had never even heard it. Maybe in today's world, that journey just takes on a different form, reaching people online, through social media, through these digital platforms.
Yeah, exactly. The methods may have changed, but that core message is the same. A message of love, hope, and redemption. And I think Matthias, with that unwavering commitment he had to spreading the gospel, I think he would embrace those new avenues.
It's really inspiring to think about. And it's a challenge for us too, right? To find those new creative ways to share our faith in a world that is, increasingly secular, a world that is often kind of skeptical of organized religion.
It is. It asks us to be thoughtful and intentional about the way we live our lives, letting our actions speak as loudly as our words. It's about building bridges instead of walls, finding that common ground, engaging in dialogue respectfully, even with people who see things differently.
That's well said. Matthias' story, even though it's kind of shrouded in this mystery, it ultimately shows us the power of faith, how we can overcome adversity. It reminds us how important it is to stay true to what we believe, even when it's hard. And it shows the lasting impact that one person, even someone who might seem ordinary, can have on the world.
It's a story that continues to inspire us, challenge us, and as we wrap up our time exploring the life of St. Matthias, we want to thank you, our listeners, for joining us. We hope this has sparked your curiosity and inspired you to keep exploring that fascinating world of early Christianity.
We encourage you to keep thinking about Matthias. Let his example of faithfulness, his courage, and his unwavering commitment to sharing that good news be a source of encouragement, of inspiration for you. Until next time, may you continue sowing the good seed in your own hearts and in the world all around you.